Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending today's webinar. We're just going to give you another minute or so to allow everyone to log in, and then we'll begin the webinar shortly. Thanks a lot. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Reuven Sussman of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and I'm here with Maxine Chicumbo, our Communications Associate. ACEEE is a nonprofit research and advocacy organization which works to advance energy efficiency policies and programs, technologies, investments, and behaviors. To learn more about our work at ACEEE, you can check out our website at ACEEE or ACEEE.org. Let's go to the next slide. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right. So, as I mentioned, I am the Senior Manager of the Behavior and Human Dimensions Program at ACEEE. I should mention, Maxine and myself are here physically in Washington, D.C., but Beth, our presenter for today, is in Colorado. And as a manager of the Behavior and Human Dimensions Program, I lead research on human behavior and energy efficiency, and I also co-chair the annual Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference, or BECC. What you're tuning in for today is the fourth webinar in our BECC series, the BECC webinar series. And it's also kind of our second in our series by speakers named Beth. The last one, of course, was by Beth Carlin talking about storytelling. Today we'll be looking at utilities more. BECC is a unique conference in that it brings together individuals who don't always have the opportunity to share knowledge. Researchers, policymakers, utility program implementers, and businesses focused on energy and behavior to achieve actionable climate solutions. BECC is in its 12th year, and it's co-convened by UC Berkeley, Stanford University, and ACEEE. Since its inception, we've helped to spark the creation of companion conferences in Europe and Japan, and this year we've started a webinar series to present this research throughout the year. And as I mentioned, this is the fourth one that we're doing this year. We'd love to see you at this year's BECC conference. It's taking place in Sacramento, November 17th to 20th, and registration is now open to the general public. The price goes up on October 25th, so register soon. All right, now let's get to some logistics before we get started. All of the attendees are currently in listen-only mode. Following Beth's remarks, we will open up the webinar to questions. But throughout the presentation, feel free to type your questions into the chat box and work to address those during the question and answer period. Maxine here is keeping track of your questions, and we'll be sure to answer them. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and we'll send you a link at the end of the webinar. So now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Beth Fitzgerald. Pardon me. Beth Fitzgerald. Beth is a regular BECC participant and a member of the BECC Social Committee this year. She combines her physics training and interest in human behavior science to analyze energy efficiency and demand response programs and to consult with utilities on how to design and implement those programs. Beth researches behavior programs and strategies focusing on the intersection between demand-side management and customer experience. She helped design and manage the Boulder County Energy Smart program. Before she joined Esource, Beth holds a bachelor's in physics from Colorado College, a master's in environmental studies from the University of Colorado Boulder. So today's webinar, titled Utilities Investing in Behavior Change Programs, Get the Inside Scoop, is about how utilities are diving into behavior science to help their customers reduce energy use, highlighting trends in utility investment in behavior programs, and sharing case studies of utilities that are incorporating specific strategies into program offerings. Thanks, Beth, for leading today's webinar. Beth, you can have the floor now.
Great, thank you, Reuven. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining the call, and definitely send in those questions. I'll look forward to some chatting at the end. But today I want to start by just diving in to my first slide, if I can get it to move forward. Hold with me here. Oh dear, having some technical issues here. Oh, goodness. Well, that's exciting. Hold tight, we're gonna figure this out. Reuven or Maxine, do you have any ideas? I am not able to move my slides at all. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Beth, we can hear you. I'm not sure what the issue is, but we're looking into it.
Okay.
We're just making sure that we have control. Have you clicked on your screen and tried hitting advance?
Well, of course, as soon as you say it. Works great. Thanks. Just like when you have the IT staff come to fix your computer and it magically fixes itself. Fantastic. All right. Well, sorry for that little delay. But, you know, if you're on the call today, you probably are slightly familiar with this concept. But I think, you know, we've been in this mode for a long time of the idea that, oh, man, if only our customers understood, if only they knew how much money they could save, or if they understood how to define a lumen versus a Kelvin scale, gosh, then they would do the right things, right? That's kind of our MO. So we put out webinars, we put out brochures, but really haven't seen much action from those kinds of things. And we're not alone in this problem, right? Public health, financial organizations, the anti-smoking campaigns, all of these are trying to get people to change their behaviors and are dealing with really similar challenges. So one of my favorite studied examples of this real good intentioned education focus comes from the literature and community-based social marketing. I got this example from Doug Mackenzie Moore, which a group hosted these intensive workshops to teach residential energy conservation, and it really was this very best case scenario, right? They had people who volunteered to spend 3 hours of their time. That's a long time to have with people in a room. Doing hands-on activities, lectures, all these ways to learn how to reduce energy use in their homes. And the workshop measured, they went in with a great design, and they measured changes in attitudes and beliefs. And they saw that after these 3 hours of intensive training, the attendees had measurable improvements on their awareness of issues, their confidence, their willingness to make changes in their homes. But then the results, right? There were 40 participants in these workshops, and only one made a recommended change after attending. So even in this beautiful, you know, best case education scenario, clearly just knowing, just understanding wasn't the major barrier here. And there are better ways to create change, and that's what I want to talk about today, particularly in how utilities are approaching this challenge today. And some ways that maybe we can all learn from. So it's nice to meet you. My name is Beth Fitzgerald. As Reuven said, I work at an organization called Esource here out in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. And we're aiming to help utilities move into the future, reducing energy use and focusing on people, which, you know, at their heart are social creatures. So that's why we're here. We're a research and consulting organization, and we focus on that customer side of utilities. So DSM, demand side management, is really our core area. And the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today are all examples drawn mostly from our utility clients across the United States and Canada, which is our focus area. We do a lot of data analysis and best practice research. So the reason that I'm, you know, able to provide this kind of industry overview is because we do have that unique position. Our utility customers provide about 75% of all of the electricity and gas that goes out to customers in the United States and Canada. So we have a pretty good big picture overview of the trends of what's happening, and have been in the industry for over 30 years. So that's a little bit about me. And now, you know, that's me there in my utility t-shirt. I like utilities, and I know I'm not, maybe not in the norm there. Maybe you don't have an I heart utility t-shirt, but utilities have such a unique position in this fight to save the world, right? Almost everyone gets their lighting, their heating, their electronics, fuels from a utility company. So they have enormous reach. And I'm guessing most on the call know this, but, you know, typically utilities are mandated in some form or another to have some kind of energy saving goals. So they're a prime audience for this kind of activity. You know, they need to reach energy saving goals, and their customers are plentiful. So it's a really unique opportunity to make big impacts. So today, like I said, I'm going to focus on some of the utility case studies and data trends that can show us some potential for where we can be heading and how we can be making these big impacts. Just a quick idea of where we're heading over the next 25 or 30 minutes. I do have a little bit of data that we're going to start off with the really exciting graphs and charts. So I'll try to keep everybody on the edge of their seats for that part. And then we're going to dive into a little discussion of home energy report programs. Those really are the biggest, baddest behavior programs out there right now. And then we'll get into stories of some of the more unique, potentially cutting edge, newer things that might offer some better alternatives or some additional options to expand our influence in the behavior space. So, spoiler alert, you know, we want to have a great solution. We want to save the world, but it doesn't look like so far there's going to be any one silver bullet here, but there's a lot of interesting and valuable places to start. So that's what I'm hoping that you all can take away is one or two great ideas. So here's one of those graphs I warned you about. We're going to do just a few of them, but we do a lot of data analysis from what the utilities put out. You know, these are their annual reports or their filings, and there's a lot of utilities out there in the behavior program space already. The ones that aren't, typically when we talk to them, they say they're interested, they're looking at it, and it's working well. Residential behavior programs are working well for utilities. So this first graph here is the entire portfolio of energy efficiency related programming. Residential behavior programs cost about 2% on average of a utility's portfolio cost. But when you look at the savings, they provide 10% on average. So it's a really outsized impact. You know, for a relatively small cost, they're getting a really big savings impact. So utilities like this. They're a cost-effective program. Just a couple notes that yes, the data here is from a large analysis that we did in 2015, but those trends have remained the same as we look at more recent data as well. And this research looks at electric savings. These are kilowatt hour, cost per kilowatt hour, but we do have some research coming out soon on the gas side of things as well, which is not quite as well studied in the industry, but there are certainly gas impacts from behavior programs as well. This is a little bit of trending over time. So the red line, which is normed on the left there, is the spending. And you can see the blue line on the right is the savings. So they're going up together, right, over the last handful of years. utilities are getting more and more invested and getting more and more impacts out of behavior programs. So this, you can even see a little bit of a separation there on the end. It looks like the programs are getting a little more cost effective over time. And there's just a lot of interest. So if you're out there in a, an implementation vendor kind of space, utilities want these solutions. They're really great. If you're a utility, you can see a little bit of what your peers are up to. So, like I said, by and large, when we look at these programs that are rising impacts and rising costs over time, most of them, almost all of them, are home energy report programs. This is a pretty standard home energy report. I'm going to give just a brief overview in case you're not familiar, but I'm guessing most people have heard about this kind of program. Home energy reports are an opt-out program, which already is a great design option because it allows for good evaluation. So there are statistically equivalent control groups. It reaches a huge part of the customer population, and people can leave if they want to, although typically opt-out rates are quite low. So this is one, very typical behavior, or I'm sorry, home energy report, that would get mailed out to a customer on a regular basis, somewhere between, say, 4 and 8 of these per year. And they create behavioral savings by tapping into energy use feedback and social norms. So typically the report has 2 different kinds of social norms. That would be a descriptive norm here in the middle that says, how much am I using compared to my neighbors? Your home, average home, efficient home. That's a very standard model. And then they also include an injunctive norm here at the top. Early iterations of these reports didn't have that injunctive norm. That's telling you what you should do, right? Here's what you are doing and here's what you should do. And before they had that should component in there, they actually found that the customers who were more efficient than average, if you were more efficient than average, you tended to use more energy because you moved toward that average, moved toward the middle. You didn't want to, be out of the norm there. So adding this injunctive norm really helps everyone move toward a more efficient space at the end, right? And then there's also space on the reports that the utilities can each customize. Typically, there's some more detailed information of some sort, space to answer common questions, and the opportunity to connect to other programs or, products, services that the utility offers. Potentially solutions to say, hey, you're not using as much, or you're using more than you want to. Here's, a program that can help you get a rebate to maybe improve your energy use. So these home energy reports have been a pretty reliable source of savings. Again, most of the slides we looked at the beginning represented these. They average about 1 to 2.5, maybe upwards of 3% savings per customer. And they've been around and providing that level of savings now for 10 years, a little more than 10 years. So we can look at that and say, great, pat on the back. These are excellent, they're reliable, they're sticking out with over the test of time. But I kind of look at it and say, gosh, 1, 2%? Is that really all we can do? Surely there is more out there, right? So that's where I want to drive forward a little bit, and that's some of the stories we'll look at next. And the stories that we're going to focus on, these case studies, incorporate a variety of behavioral strategies. Here's just a selection. This is not comprehensive. If you want to look, ACEEE has done some really great work around IDing and categorizing behavioral strategies. But I'm kind of pulling out a few that I particularly like. We've talked about feedback and social norms already in the home energy reports, and then some of these others we'll highlight in the upcoming stories. And the idea here is that these are the pieces of the puzzle, right? That if we can put these together into how we interact with our customers, this is how we go beyond just education. This is how we get more effective ways to create behavior change. And I just want to stress that there's kind of 2 approaches from the utility perspective. one approach is that you can select one or several of these strategies and design a behavioral program. Really that's what a home energy report does. But there's also a huge opportunity that's kind of underexplored, I think, in incorporating some of these strategies into existing programs. I'll touch on that a little bit as we go through our case studies, but I think that's, like I said, a huge opportunity area. How can we embed commitments into our rebate program, or how can we create more prompts and follow through in our home energy audit program? Working these into existing models. So, into the stories. Marketplaces, like I said, these are going to be some like new novel things. Marketplaces are not new and novel at all. They have been around for a while. There's a variety of vendors. The basic concept being this is a platform for customers to come in and buy stuff from their utility, usually with a utility rebate, right? And so these are great. They're great for a lot of reasons. They improve customer experience. They can offer a solution, like we talked about on those home energy reports. Hey, you suck at using energy. Here, come buy a smart thermostat or buy some new products for your home. It's a solution that allows the utility to help customers. But is that really a behavior-focused program? Not necessarily, until there's one model out there that is making headlines right now, and this is from the vendor NRV, and it's a model that focuses less on selling a widget and more on nudging customers to buy more efficient products. So it's a different setup. It's a different kind of marketplace. It doesn't just offer a small selection of these are the products that we offer, that we have on our shelves and have a rebate for. But instead, it offers access to hundreds of products. Most of them don't have a rebate, but it just sends customers, you can see on the screen here, see all 5 offers, see all 9 offers. It will send the customer to a different retail platform to actually complete the purchase. But on this marketplace page, it offers a lifetime cost comparison. It offers reviews, which adds that kind of social norm nudge of, 700 plus people have bought and loved this thing. And its kind of core feature is this, that green circle there with the number in the middle. They call that the NRV score. And that's the real behavioral nudge to say, if you're looking at a washing machine, hey, instead of getting this low performing, low efficiency model that, the score is a 0 to 100, right? So maybe you're looking at a washing machine that has a 65. Did you know you can come over to this other washing machine that's, I don't know, $50 more expensive and get a 94? Maybe that's worth looking into. So that's the behavior component, is nudging people away from the less efficient toward the more efficient. And California has recently agreed that this is a source of valid savings. So the California Public Utility Commission just approved this as a model that is an acceptable way to claim behavior savings. That's pretty big news, because previously home energy reports were it in California. And they're still working out a lot of the details. They don't have it totally figured out how they're going to count and evaluate the savings, but they're doing that right now and planning to claim savings in 2019. So this is now. In terms of naming that behavior strategy, this incorporates several. It is some education and information. It also is convenience, norms around those reviews, some framing, and when you incorporate some of the marketing strategies that often go with it, it can be prompts as well, that it kind of interrupts and shows you, hey, come check this one out. So I think that's a really interesting model, something that we're definitely paying attention to see where we can go next. Next one is one that I am super jazzed about. I want everyone to know about this. So prepay services. Maybe you haven't thought about this for your particular, energy bill, but my the story I always go back to is, gosh, what if we paid for our groceries the way that we pay for our electricity? I'm just going to show up at the store. I'll fill up my cart, bring it home. I'll go back again next week, get some more, and maybe, oh, that cake looks really good. I'll bring that home and stock up a little bit. And how about in a month, maybe 2 months, take your time, send me the bill for whatever I just took home. I have no idea. It would be a real shocker. And clearly that sounds ridiculous, right? But that is the model that we use for our electricity. So thinking about prepay is really not super novel. We do this for our gasoline, we do this for our groceries. More and more people are doing it for cell phones. So utilities are picking up on this. A lot of utilities offer prepaid billing, where you load up your account, you get some kind of notifications as you're spending it down. Gosh, you're getting close to the end. Your fuel gauge is getting low, your minutes are getting low, whatever. And then if you let it run out, you may get some kind of penalty, right? Potentially some places do disconnect from power. But then it's a really quick, immediate reconnect as soon as you load it back up. So there are some concerns from consumer advocacy groups around the disconnection. That's an area that needs a lot more study, but early results show that the customer impact is still positive even through some of that. So I'm curious to see where those studies go. And it uses some of these behavioral strategies, right? You're getting the feedback of these notifications, you're getting prompts from those notifications. It can incorporate goal setting. If you're setting, this is my budget, I'm going to stick to it. Now I can make more informed choices to stick to those goals. And there are some people who are starting to look at savings opportunities from this as well. Because if people have more information, if they can set goals, they may choose to use less electricity. So we're only aware of three utilities. I want to make this very clear. Only 3 utilities that have actually claimed savings as a DSM program for prepaid billing. The rest of the ones up here, Glacier, Jackson, Oklahoma, Peninsula, those are places who have offered prepaid billing and just kind of said, this seems like it's got some potential. Let's measure it, let's figure it out. But they're not actually including that as part of their DSM portfolio. And the 2 with the arrows here, as well as one that we just learned about, is Orlando Utility Commission in Florida, plus APS and Salt River Project in Arizona, have claimed savings. Now the numbers here are percent per customer. So OUC in Florida has about 5% claimed savings, APS is just under 8, Salt River Project is 12. Salt River Project has been running their program since the 90s, way before AMI, that's the smart meters, and they have been getting consistent savings over 20 years now, which is pretty incredible, and they have a huge number of their customer base on this program. APS was an investor-owned utility that piloted this idea and has discontinued it, but they did do a rigorous third-party evaluation, as did SRP, and backed out disconnects, backed out any other kind of conflicting input, and still ended up with almost 8% savings. So just as a refresher, we currently have programs out there that we are psyched about. Home energy reports, reliable, consistent, 1 to 2%. This is 5, 8, 12% savings. It's just an insane comparison. So I think there's a huge potential here. Obviously, there's definitely some things that we still need to figure out in terms of the consumer protections. But Esource has started looking into that, and initial information is really positive. Customers want prepay. So Esource did a study with more than 3,000 residential utility customers. 66% of customers think that their utility should offer prepay. And especially among a younger crowd, of those customers in the range of 18 to 34, 46% of them are very likely or somewhat likely to participate. So this is clearly not just a tiny niche thing. It's becoming more normal. It's becoming more interesting to people. even though prepay really started as just an option for low-income customers, largely because it didn't require any connection fee or any deposits. But our survey data really shows that there's just as much interest among high-income customers as low-income customers. And particularly, there's 4 customer groups that are most gung-ho about this, super excited about prepay. And that's folks that are on a daily or weekly budget, right? You can fill up your account whenever you want. So if you get a weekly paycheck, you can fill it up then, not just wait till the once a month. You can do, like I said, there's no service or connection fee. So if that's a major barrier, that's definitely a customer group that appreciates prepay. Folks who own infrequently used homes, this is one of those, like, maybe some disconnections are happening by choice that we need to look into a little bit more. And then people who are paying for college student utility bills. I've heard this from 2 different perspectives. One is the parent, right? Keeping their kid in line. Don't you go spending more than you should. The other one is the roommate, right? You've got your responsible roommate, and then you've got the partier roommate. The responsible one, of course, is the one whose name is on the utility bill, and they can kind of keep their roommates in line a little bit easier if you've got a set meter that's going to run out, right? The other really cool thing about prepay that I just shocked me as I started learning more about this is the idea that it can really reverse this notion of utilities being the big bad guy, right? Gosh, they came in and they turned off my energy, they turned off my power, and it moves the responsibility, and it moves the efficacy onto the customer, that they can own their own control over their home, of their electricity use, their energy use. So after prepay, customers have really reported this greater control over energy, from the sense of, hey, you turned off my electricity, to, oh, hey, my electricity ran out. Cool, okay, I can fix that. So like I said, super jazzed on this, would be happy to talk way more in detail if anyone wants to follow up afterwards, but let's tell a couple more stories. This is an app-based behavior opportunity here from DTE Energy. They have DTE Insights, is pretty unique in that it's one of the only standalone app-based programs that has actual savings coming out of it that they can claim as a behavior program. So DTE has set this up. It's in partnership with a few other things, including, I mean, they do actually partner with home security, smart home systems, those kinds of things as well, to make it really salient and relevant. But the energy core uses bill estimates. So you get to see kind of that forecasted, what I'm going to be using, setting goals. It includes usage info and tips, along with like the monetary value of following through on those tips. And it's got a community aspect, right? There's weekly challenges that you can earn rewards. There's a community platform to share and, you know, commiserate, I don't know. And they have studied this and set up a deemed savings through evaluation of 1.6% per download. So again, this is a pretty viable savings opportunity. There's very low incremental cost. So once you get it set up, the more the merrier, right? If you can get lots of people to download it, there's not additional cost to the utility. And it incorporates, you know, name that behavior strategy. It incorporates feedback, goals, norming, convenience, competition. So you see some themes here. The stories that I'm picking out really are integrating a lot of behavior strategies in one, and that's often what we see as the most successful option. Energy advisors is another one that's pretty near and dear to my heart. And you know, I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of these things are standalone behavior programs. Let's take some behavior strategies, let's make some improvements that really are just about nudging consumer behavior. Energy advisors are a little bit different. They're typically layered onto some other existing program. So this is what I was talking about, of taking some behavior strategies and incorporating them into programs that already exist, these rebate programs or these more conventional capital improvement programs. So an energy advisor, in case you don't know, they have a lot of names, sometimes a coach or an advocate, and they walk with a customer through the program in a variety of ways. Some are pretty low touch, some are very high touch. And the main idea is just moving customers through a utility program. Most often we see this in home energy audit programs, that they kind of help customers understand the audit and then move them up through getting some kind of upgrade. But also it could be on any type of a program, including commercial. And some of the focus areas that advisors often tackle for customers is prioritizing, where should I start? What's the first upgrade I should do? Or, why should I do this one versus that one? Providing unbiased advice on where to start, how to go through the contractor bid process, reviewing bids. And then the advisors often will help with the rebate process as well. I don't know if any of you have filled out a rebate form, but not always the easiest, right? They can be pretty dense. So having somebody who fills out rebate forms all day, every day, do that for you is a huge benefit to nudge people through those programs. So this is full of behavior science. It's a very human-centered design idea. It offers a trusted messenger, prompts and follow through, convenience, information, all rolled into one and more. And one of the examples that I love to talk about, because it's near and dear to my heart, is the Energy Smart program in Boulder County. In case you missed the intro, full disclosure, I did help design this program and ran it back when I worked for Boulder County before my current role. But there's other organizations that have done very similar things, PG&E and Pepco for a couple, and there's certainly more. So the Energy Smart program, it's not a utility program, but they did partner with XL Energy, and XL Energy offers something fairly similar. When they designed this, they really dug into understanding the barriers. So if anybody's looked into community-based social marketing or a variety of these other models for moving forward with behavior, understanding the actions you're working towards and then the barriers and benefits you're trying to address, right? That needs to be the first step. And that's what we did here. And we noticed that the things that are holding people up is not always just the money or the information. People don't know who to trust, right? Contractors don't always have our best interests in mind. There are great contractors, and then there are really skeezy contractors, and it's not always easy to tell the difference. Customers need help with that. Evaluating bids, which of these upgrades really are going to help me and why? And just people are busy, right? You get your energy audit, you look at it briefly, and then you say, oh yeah, I'll totally get to that. Put it on the shelf, and then life happens and you forget. So addressing some of these barriers, the energy advisor in Boulder County really worked people through just being that nudger, right? Hey, I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to help you make these decisions. I'm going to, provide some a list of contractors that we have pre-screened that we know that they do quality work, and we're going to find the rebates. We're going to fill out the forms for you. It's so that was the birth of the energy advisor. It's been around for over 10 years. They've served more than 10% of the population here in Boulder County, and it made a big difference, right? So the number on the screen there is, of course, like the most costly, the most labor-intensive example, right? These are people who went out to homes, sat down at the kitchen table, worked through the process with them, and were able to achieve upwards of 83% conversion. So that's, you get your audit, you make some kind of paid upgrade. That's huge, coming from an industry where the average is much closer to 10% conversion rates. Really big impacts, but also really big cost, right? So they're working right now on phone advisors, on email opportunities. How can we continue to maintain some valuable savings, some valuable conversion assistance, and that hugely beneficial customer experience without the huge cost of rolling people out to actual houses. That's so costly. So they're still seeing some great results that way, but these can have huge impacts, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the model. So really briefly, I don't have time to tell all of the stories that I want to tell. There's so many great examples out there. Here's just a couple other of my favorites that I would be happy to answer maybe some questions on in the Q&A, or we can follow up later. There's some folks who are doing laundry-focused things. Idaho Power, I think this is such a cute example. I'm imagining Idaho, a very rural area. They handed out clothes drying racks. the people came to Idaho Power's parking lot, and the utility staff physically handed them a clothes drying rack. It was a huge customer success. People loved it. It was so costly in terms of employee time, and it was a huge labor effort. But they saw really great uptake, and really, they've got a waiting list. People want to do this again. They're still working on evaluations, and I recently heard that they just got in their latest. They're going to be making decisions about whether to continue this program. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But a cool idea. Nicor Gas is doing some cold water wash efforts with messaging and working on fighting that barrier of people assuming that cold water is not going to get their clothing clean. So that's, again, a really great behavior-based strategy there. XL Energy has a mobile app it's sort of like a mobile home energy report, working on energy saving tips and comparisons. And then there's a lot, and I'm sure if you come to the BECC conference in the fall, there'll be some folks talking about these things, is expanding our home energy reports into more digital solutions. Like I mentioned earlier with the marketplace, that can be a solution. There's other ways to connect to online audits and dive deeper into what some of the problems might be, or into high bill alerts to get maybe some of the benefits of prepay without actually prepaying. If you get these notifications of how much I'm using. On the demand response side, getting behavioral messaging to save energy at just a very specific peak event is also being successful. 1 to 5% peak savings for sending out these kind of, hey, help us out. You won't get any money for it, but you'll be helping out the community. Join your neighbors, kind of a thing. These are all really viable potentials that we're keeping an eye on. We didn't talk as much on the commercial side today. Mostly, residential is my bread and butter, but there are a lot of interesting things happening on the commercial side as well in terms of challenges. PSE, Puget Sound Energy, and PG&E both ran challenge, kind of set a goal. If you reach it, there's rewards. Urban Smart Bellevue included such fun things as like rubber chickens and mini cupcake celebrations in office buildings for getting people to take the stairs, cutesy stuff like that had some good awareness. Manitoba Hydro up in Canada also had an office competition where they worked with the portfolio manager program, aiming to get people down 10% energy reductions. They're also in evaluation mode right now. So there's a lot of stuff happening. People are really ready. They're ready to make the next step. And I want to just kind of summarize in saying that we still in our research see home energy reports as a valuable component of this solution set. They're a reliable source of savings, a tool that we think will stay in the toolbox, in the DSM portfolio for some time, but also that we can do so much more with behavioral savings. And there's such a need for better ways to measure and claim those savings, working with the regulators, working with the, whoever the overseers are. And we're really looking forward to seeing some of our partner organizations out there, probably some of you on the line if you're in the evaluator space, digging into that challenge, figuring out how we can claim these savings more reliably, how we can measure things better, so that we can scale up. That's our BECC theme this year, so we can scale up these social science know-hows into a true global utility scale. So if you want to learn more, these are some of the things that I'm working on. We've got some recent research out and some upcoming reports, as well as we run behavioral peer sharing calls, actually on a variety of topics, but I run behavioral peer sharing calls. If you're a utility on the line and want to learn more about that, definitely follow up with me. You can exchange thoughts and ideas and challenges with your peers. And then if you haven't been to Denver for the Esource Forum conference in the fall, it's like 2 whole months before BECC, so I think you could probably manage 2 trips, if you can. It's a really great conference. It's lots of fun. I'll be there. And before I jump into questions, I want to just, put a plug in again for the BECC conference. I will also be there along with most of the folks you've maybe heard on previous webinars with BECC so far. Come say hi. And it's a really, truly a great conference. I've enjoyed it every year I've gone. So thanks for listening. And if you have questions, please enter them in now and feel free to follow up with me anytime.
Thank you so much, Beth. We're now going to address a few questions from attendees, and if you have a question you haven't already done so, please type the question into the chat box. While you're typing your questions in, Beth, I did want to mention that ACEEE, in conjunction with 7th Wave, now called Slipstream, wrote a report on prepaid electricity, and I just wanted to touch on some of the findings that we found from that report. Because although we found it to be a good program for most of the people, most of the time, people seem to really like it. Those who are extremely budget constrained, as you mentioned, could put themselves at risk, and that's why we couldn't, take a position on it. We also found that, although the savings were relatively high, we noted that those are opt-in programs, whereas behavior like home energy reports are opt-out programs, so we would expect a lower percentage savings. And most of the programs that we were familiar with, that we saw the evaluations do cut people off when they run out of credit. I know that there's some proposed that do things other than shut people's electricity off, but for most of the ones that we saw, in fact, all the ones that we saw that were properly evaluated, turn people off when they run out of credit, and that's why they're controversial, because most of the people that enroll in them are low-income consumers. And so before we generalize to those other segments, and I think those other segments are important, we do want to note that the evaluations that show that there's these great savings are based on people who are maybe not reflective of the general population. So I just wanted to note those caveats because ACEEE did that report. If you're interested in the report, or anyone else is, you can just Google Minnesota prepaid electricity and my name, Sussman, and you'll get the report on that. Overall, it's good for most people most of the time, but I did have some concerns about the evaluations and what they found. But what do you think of that?
Sure, and to be totally honest, I have that report on my desk. I've read about the first 3 pages so far, so I'm working on it. But a lot of our examples, we have a very close relationship with SRP as well as with APS, so that's most of our experience so far is from those 2 in Arizona. And I know SRP in particular has expanded their program so far beyond just their low-income community that that they do have some really great, some great data showing the value to a general population and the savings potential from a general population. I completely agree with the concerns, the potential risks that we don't want to be advocating something that could potentially be a consumer detriment. Forcing deprivation or dangerous situations, particularly most of the prepay that we're aware of does have some caveats around they can't shut off during extreme weather events, or they can't shut off at nighttime, and people who have what's the terminology would be, I don't remember exactly, but if they have medical devices that need to be plugged in, they would not be eligible for prepay. So there's some consumer protection built in, but I think as I said, I think that's a huge area of needed research to really understand what that relationship is between deprivation and conservation, and maybe even is there some deprivation by choice that's acceptable versus deprivation that is really causing harm? And I don't think that's well understood.
Yeah, I think that's a really key issue, and we in that report suggest more research is necessary. Also, just to address one question that came in from elsewhere, asking whether people on prepay get a discount. Maybe you can correct me on this, but I understand that in North America, you usually don't get a discount for being on prepay, whereas in other places in the world, like I think in Ireland, maybe in Pakistan, you have, by law, there's a 2% discount for people who prepay. I understand that actually sometimes it could be expensive for people to be on prepay if they have to pay at the vendor and there's vendor fees. Sometimes these are balanced out and they're cheaper or equal cost to postpay. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so my examples are strictly from North America, so I don't know much about the international world. I know prepay is very common internationally, but I don't have details. But within North America, certainly that in our experience, prepay, the cost per say kilowatt hour tends to actually be slightly higher which ends up being mostly a wash. It could be very slightly more expensive, but they have to incorporate, say, those like the service charge kind of things that are usually a separate line item on your monthly bill. Those have to get incorporated some way to maintain the infrastructure and those kinds of things. So that gets added to the kilowatt hour charge instead. So the cost per kilowatt hour is a little bit higher, and overall costs tend to be similar or very, very slightly higher. Yeah, I'm not aware of anyone that gives discounts for prepay.
Thanks. Maxine, what else do we have?
So we have quite a few questions. Try to get through as many of them as we can. So one question is, how is Energy different from Energy Star?
Oh, interesting. So, this may be a little outside my personal expertise, but my understanding is that Energy Star, perhaps the folks on the line, Ruben and Maxine, can correct me. Energy Star is a kind of a yes or no. You get Energy Star rating or you do not, and there are attempts to do the labeling with, this is your expected energy use over the lifetime or annually, but I think this is a faster, easier, clearer communication with much more granular information. So Energy Star televisions, I believe on NRV can range from something like the 50s or 60s all the way up to 100. So there's a lot of variation potential in energy use within the Energy Star certification, and NRV can help push to the most efficient, not just getting to some kind of baseline's the wrong word, but a set level of acceptable energy improvement. We can really push to the most energy improvement with that scalable system.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right to me.
Okay, next question is, how can we better design programs to target low-income individuals who may waste the most and have higher energy burdens but are unable to take up programs with upfront costs?
Oh gosh, that's a really big question, and we probably could do a full hour just on that. But I guess the short answer is that we've seen the most success on low-income programs in partnership opportunities. So when utilities, they're expensive. They're expensive programs to run. Most utilities have some leeway in, not having to make their low-income programs at least as cost-effective as others, but they're still very expensive. And so the most successful examples we're aware of are when utilities are able to partner with community organizations or government entities to combine resources, but also combine like financial resources and also people resources and time resources. So those community agencies often have a foot in the community already. They have trusted relationships. So it's really, it's tapping into those same kind of behavioral principles of looking at what are the barriers for low income. Yes, financials is part of the answer, but there's also a lot of trust issues. There's a lot of access issues. These, low income individuals are often extraordinarily time constrained. And so finding situations where you have a trusted messenger, a community partner who can be comfortable in the homes or in the community center already is a huge benefit. And yeah, I guess that would be the short answer. And then if you want to follow up, feel free to send me an email. We'd be happy to chat a little bit more in detail, whoever answered that or whoever asked that question.
Okay, and another question here is, so you shared some residential and commercial examples. I'm an industrial SEM coach. Do you have any industrial examples you could share?
Sure. So like I said, my personal focus area is more on the residential side, and the industrial examples I'm aware of generally we lump together as commercial and industrial. So I'm trying to do a quick brain scan of which ones are more commercial, which ones are more industrial. SEM is by far the most common and what we've considered to have kind of the most potential. They're growing remarkably quickly, budgets and impacts from SEM programs. So that would be strategic energy management, if you're not aware. And then, there's also some programs out there for, grant funding or shared funding for having an energy manager on site. There's a program out of the Midwest, and I'm blanking exactly on who's doing it, and as well as building operator certification programs. Getting somebody into those buildings who will have some know-how, can be an advocate, but also speak the language of the building needs as well. So familiarity with the energy needs and familiarity with the business needs. I think those are the other successful examples that I can pull quickly off the top of my head. Yeah, I think SEM, if you're in that world already, I think that is where we are seeing the most potential right now as well.
Okay, and then another question that's, I guess, asking for examples. Can you speak to which end users are seeing the largest savings from these programs? So, like, i.e. from heating or appliances?
That is a $1 million question to whoever asked that. If you'd like to go out and study that, please let us know. There is not a lot of great research. Most of the research out there is self-reporting after the fact. It's really hard to get concrete data on exactly what end uses are changing. So the analysis that causes the evaluations that go into this are typically billing analysis. So we can see the overall reductions, but we don't have a lot of clarity into what's causing those. And some survey data says thermostat setbacks are fairly common. Changes in lighting usage are fairly common, but that's, again, it's not very well backed up yet by extensive evaluation. That's definitely an area for need.
Okay, another question here is, how would you say prepaid billing is different from levelized billing?
I mean, fundamentally, the difference is when you pay. I think prepay has a lot more incentive to reduce, where levelized billing is, establishing kind of your average, and then exactly what you're going to pay every month. And if you get, again, my understanding of levelized billing programs is that when you get to the end of the year, there will be some kind of true up. So if you go over your amount, you'll have to pay that off later. That actually, it feels a little bit more like taxes to me, right? You have some withholdings, you hope that that's pretty close to right, and then at the end of the year, you really hope that you're going to get a little refund instead of have to pay. Whereas, you're not really getting that feedback throughout the process. You're not able to make changes as you go along. So I think they're actually fundamentally quite different, and there's a lot more potential for understanding. There, I use that bad word again. A lot more opportunity for inspiring change when there's that more frequent ability to see a change, right? If I know I'm going to pay the same amount every month, why should I change my behavior?
Hey Beth, we're running up to the end of the allotted time. Are you okay going maybe 5 minutes over?
I am happy to do that if people want to stay on the line.
All right, so at this point we want to say thank you to everybody. We'll take a few more questions and we'll probably go 5 minutes over. Please stick around if you're interested, and if you're not, we totally understand.
Okay, just a few more questions. So this is a question in reference to your share of savings pie chart. Someone was asking if it's based on annual or lifetime savings.
I believe those are all annual. Yeah, as I'm thinking through, yes, those would be all annual reports. Yeah, and annual savings data. Yep.
Okay. Then another question here. If the notion here is that utilities should be claiming prepaid savings in their DSM portfolios, should they also have to count the increase in energy usage from auto bill pay and level pay plans?
Interesting question.
That's a fascinating question. I I'm going to punt that one. I have never thought about that, and I think that it's pretty unlikely considering the depth of historical context as that being the norm. But yeah, I don't have a good answer for that one.
That's interesting. I think it's a good idea, and there needs to be more research on the effects of auto bill and paperless billing on consumption rates. I believe that there's no experimental data on that, but there is some economic modeling data that seems to show that when people don't get their bills, they get less feedback, and they might increase consumption slightly. So that's interesting to think about.
Yeah, great question.
And then this is another question about energy advisors. This person is asking, isn't the energy advisor model generally not cost effective for savings, certainly important for customer experience, but not good for the dollar to kilowatt return? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I kind of brushed against the side of that, and I certainly can more directly say yes. I think that's been the common experience so far, is that it's really hard to make this cost effective. So as I said, the 83% conversion rate we saw was in houses. It was people driving around the county. It was very expensive, and it was certainly not cost effective. Thankfully, we were operating under an ARA grant that, back in the good old days of lots of money for energy efficiency. But for utilities who are looking at trying to make this cost effective, that's certainly something that is on still in the works. There are utilities who are working very hard to make this a cost-effective model, mostly, like I said, through phone and email opportunities. So can we have some kind of person, using our, using big data to be able to segment and target messaging to say, hey, you just got through this process, we're going to trigger this automatic email that is a prompt that helps us move forward to the next step, that reminds you of these resources and tools that we have, and then maybe having a couple of dedicated customer service lines. There's some efforts underway right now, but no, the answer right now is that no, this is not a cost-effective solution yet, but they're working on trying to make it that way.
Okay, and then we have another question here about home energy reports. So most of the home energy report alternatives covered were opt-in programs. Do you have any opt-out program recommendations?
I don't believe so at this point. Behavioral demand response, I'm trying to remember if a couple of the pilots that I know about, I believe were done as opt-out, because they certainly had very large participation bases. So it's not exactly a build out to home energy reports, but it's a similar concept that can be run as an opt-out program. But yeah, I believe that, high bill alerts, marketplaces, online audits, even yeah, any of those right now would be just as an opt-in.
Okay, I guess I'll ask 2 more questions and then we can wrap up. So for prepaid programs, you discussed people's stated preferences of wanting prepaid programs, but is there any data regarding customers' attitudes who experienced prepay? How many customers opted out?
I don't have that data in front of me, but that data does exist. Again, if that person wants to send me an email, I can get specific numbers, but it's quite low. I don't want to throw out a number and have it be wrong, but I do know that opting out of prepay is quite low. It's more often that that if that's part of the penalty structure, I know of one example of where that is part of the penalty structure, that if you don't pay your prepay, that you get moved back to post-pay. But people actually choosing, I don't like this, I want to get out, is quite uncommon, because most times people are making the choice to move in. It's an opt-in program, prepay.
Beth, I did read one evaluation from Duke Energy. This is just one case, and it may not be representative of all cases, but they had a 26% attrition rate. It doesn't mean that 26% of people left the program, but rather that from their beginning of their study to the end of the study, 26% of the people that they started in the study did not finish. So that may or may not reflect the number of people that leave prepay, but
would that include people who were, say, moving out of service?
Yeah, yeah. So there's various reasons. Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, there's going to be a percentage of people that leave any program because they've moved, they've switched providers, etc.
Yep. Okay, that's interesting. All right.
Okay, last question here in the interest of time. Any network effects-based incentives used in utilities or community collective-based incentives that you know of?
Can you ask that one more time? I missed part of it.
Are there any network effects-based incentives used in utilities or community collective-based incentives?
I'm going to show my ignorance here. I'm not familiar with network effects. I'm not sure what that means.
Or community collective-based incentives?
Beth, we're going to send you the list of these questions, and you can communicate with the people that sent them directly. So if you haven't had your question answered, you will, hopefully Beth can address them. In the meantime, let's move on to one other different question before we call it off. Is that okay?
Sure, so one more here. EM and VIA purchase for prepaid programs, is that still RCT?
Are prepaid using RCT? I believe not, because they are opt-in. It's really challenging to get an effective control group. So they, although no, I'm going to step back on my words there. Salt River Project, SRP in Arizona, did do one RCT, which I believe they did through perhaps a wait list group, where they had people who were trying to opt in, but they had to be on hold. But otherwise, I believe it's more of a modeled billing analysis.
There's one study from South Africa where they did a quasi-random design, and they used people in South Africa. They were allowed to mandate moving people to prepay, and so they controlled a little bit for a self-selection bias, because they had people that did and did not want to enroll, and they found an effect. That's a very different context, obviously, than here, but that's the closest that I found to a prepay report that was sort of quasi-experimental. Most of them, as you mentioned, are like matched control groups, or just modeling what, like pre and post, essentially, measuring how people's usage before and after.
Great.
So I guess we're going to call it. Beth, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and for presenting us this topic. Within the next day, we'll send all the participants a recording of today's event. Again, be sure to check out the BECC conference, register soon. You can search Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference, or simply go to beccconference.org. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.